Hey everyone, Chris here. Thanks for stopping by. I do appreciate it. A little bit of coffee, a little bit of crime. You know, good way to kill the evening or day, depending on when you're watching this. Two things I have a passion for: true crime and coffee. Anyway, today's story, oh my goodness, what a story this is. So this story I'm going to tell you is about a fellow named Grant Amato. Now, I'll give you a little bit of a background about the family. So they lived in a city in Florida, and they were a pretty well-off family. There was the mother, Margaret, the father, Chad, and they had 3 boys. The oldest was Jason. Now, Jason wasn't Chad's biological son, but he adopted him at 3 years old, so they might just, it was a father-son relationship for sure. The middle child was Cody, and the youngest was Grant. When this all came about, Grant was already 30 years old, so it wasn't like, you know, they were young boys or anything at this point. Now, the family was pretty, well, very well off. They had built their own home several years ago. They had all the bells and whistles and toys, you know, lots of cars. They had a gun collection. They had a lot of electronics, like computers and laptops and stuff like that. And it is said that the father, Chad, and Cody and Grant would like to build their own computers and, you know, get all the parts and build them into these, you know, massive gaming systems. Like, we're talking like $3,000–4,000 computers. They had tons of video game consoles, all that kind of fun stuff. So the family, for the most part, were all in the medical field. Mom, I can't remember what she did, but she did work from home. Dad, the father, Chad, he was a pharmacist. Jason, I think, was the only one that did not work in the medical. I believe he was a mortgage broker. Don't quote me on that. If I'm wrong, I apologize. And then Cody and Grant, they actually ended up going to nursing school, and they actually went to nursing school together. Jason had moved out of the home and gone to college and everything, and so remaining in the house was the mother, father, and Cody and Grant. Now in 2011, they went and got their nursing degree. Grant had graduated, was working, and everything was, you know, hunky-dory in the family. From what witnesses and everybody says, it just seemed like, you know, your typical everyday family. They did say that the father, Chad, was a very strict man. He wasn't necessarily, there was no evidence or no indication that he was ever abusive to the boys, but he was very strict. It was basically his way or no way. Like, you follow my rules, you live in my house, you follow my rules, or else, you know, don't live here kind of thing. In 2018, Grant was actually fired from his job at the hospital. It was said that he was stealing sedatives. You're like, sedatives? Well, when the hospital was doing their investigation, because he was originally charged with grand larceny, but when the hospital and everybody was doing their investigation, Grant had said that the reason he was stealing them was not because for his own personal use, but he felt that a lot of his patients weren't getting the proper doses. So he was stealing these sedatives for his patients. Now, it wasn't really disclosed, and I couldn't find a whole lot of information about it, but it's speculated that the reason all the charges were dropped later on was because the hospital really didn't want to, because that would open up a whole can of worms if they have a staff member stealing medication to give to patients. You know where I'm going with this? So yeah, so all the charges were dropped, and he was working on getting that charge actually completely expunged from his records. Now, Grant was living at home. He's unemployed. He's about 30 years old. He's unemployed, living at home. And, you know, I imagine boredom kicks in, a little bit of curiosity kicks in. So what does Grant do? Well, he's on the internet and he discovers a webcam site. And if any of you people don't know what a webcam girl is, I'm not going to get into details, just go Google it, but you know, use your imagination. You can probably get the gist of what a webcam girl does. So Grant discovers this, I think it was freewebcams.com or something like that. So he's on there killing a little bit of time, killing a little whatever, you know. Anyway, he discovers Sylvie. Sylvie is a webcam girl from Bulgaria, and Grant falls head over heels for her. Okay, maybe not head over heels. He becomes like literally obsessed with this woman. So he starts sending her money to have these private chats and everything else, these private little conversations or whatever, you know, they do on there. And when I said he became obsessed, like he really became obsessed. Now I think like the website worked on tokens. You had to buy tokens. Once you had the tokens, you can use those tokens to pay the girls. Now, and I think Sylvie charged, I think it was like 600 tokens for 2 hours, something like that. Anyway, I think it was like $400 US for a couple hours of her time. And there were days where he was spending up to $25,000 a day. $25,000 a day to interact and talk with Sylvie. And you're probably wondering, Chris, like where the heck is this kid? Well, I mean, I say kid, but at that point he was a young man. Where's this guy getting all this money? He's unemployed, he's living, you know, at home. Well, yeah, that's where the money comes in. So it turns out Grant was stealing his parents' credit card numbers. Not only was he stealing their credit card numbers, he was hacking into bank accounts. There were times when Cody would give him his credit card. And see, Grant had this whole persona that he was trying to give off to Sylvie, that he lived in his own home, he was very well off, he was a professional gamer. So he had that whole thing going on with Sylvie. And then with his parents, there's a gaming thing called Twitch, and I guess he was trying to get professional or famous on Twitch. So he would be telling his parents that, or you know, Cody that was lending him the money or giving him the money, that it was for advertising on Twitch and he was going to become famous, yada yada yada. Nobody really knew the extent of what was happening between him and Sylvie at all. So when it was all said and done, Grant, and this comes after the fact, but on a side note, he, all in all total, spent approximately $250,000 on this woman. This woman that he's never met. This online webcam girl. $250,000. Anyway, at one point, he had even gone to his aunt's house, stole some of her credit cards. So basically, he was just robbing everybody blind in order to get the money to give to Sylvie. When it all came to heads, I guess the family kind of figured out what was going on. I don't know why it took so long, but I guess, you know, these people aren't checking their credit card statements or something. But when the family finally found out what was happening, they freaked out. And Dad, remember Dad's pretty strict. Dad was having none of this. So basically he gave Grant two options. I think there was, no, actually there was three options, sorry. Either you go to rehab for an addictive, whatever addiction you have, you get out, or you join the military. Those are your three options. So Grant opted to go to rehab, and the family paid $15,000 for a 60-day in-house therapy. Well, of course, after 2 weeks, Grant decides to leave the rehab center, saying, you know what, they can't do anything for me. Nothing's wrong. I'm fine. There's no issues. I know what I did was bad. Yada, yada, yada. Well, so he comes back to the house, and the father basically says, well, not basically, the father did say, okay, I'm writing out this contract. These are a list of the rules. You follow them or you get out. So basically, there was a whole bunch of things in this list of rules, but the main thing is you need to stop communication with Sylvie. There will be no more of that. We've had it. And just on a side note, just to let you guys know, while Grant had been in rehab for 2 weeks, the family actually reached out to Sylvie and they told her everything. Like, he's not a professional gamer. He doesn't own his own home. He's poor. He has no money. He's been stealing. And so the family kind of outed him. Anyway, come January 24th, this contract's been written. Grant's still at home. And what does he do? Because he just cannot stop, he starts talking to Sylvie again. And, well, Dad found out. Dad found out and said, you know what? And this isn't verbatim, but he said, you know what? You broke the rules, so you can now leave. You can get out. Bye-bye. So Grant left. He packed a bunch of bags and he left. And apparently he had met Cody down the road, and we'll get into that later, but he said he met Cody down the road and basically told Cody what was happening, that he got kicked out, and Cody had said to him, don't worry, I'll handle things. So now Grant is off doing what Grant is doing, wherever Grant is going, and we'll get into that later. The next day, pretty much everybody leaves for work as they typically would, except for Mom, because Mom does work from home. And that night, it was about 9:15, Cody left work early. Now, Cody's the middle son, remember I told you that. And everybody at work thought this was really weird because Cody never leaves work early. He's very meticulous about his shifts, about his job. It was very unlike Cody to leave work early. And evidently, he had also sent his girlfriend a text message saying he wasn't going to see her that night, that he had things to take care of at home. So January 25th, this is still in 2019, Cody, the next morning, does not show up for work, which is way out of character for Cody. During the trial, there was many witnesses talking about why it was so strange, and like I said, we'll get into that later. But Cody didn't show up for work. Guy's never been late. He's never taken time off. Like I said, he was very meticulous when it came to his job. And one of his colleagues was texting him and not getting any answer. So that also drew up red flags because I guess Cody was very, Johnny on the spot with answering people back via text and stuff like that. So the colleague got a little concerned and ended up calling the local sheriff department to do a wellness check on Cody. So the sheriff department heads over to the Amato residence. Their main purpose is just to do a wellness check on Cody to make sure he's okay. All the doors were locked. There were no signs of, windows being broken. Nothing seemed strange. The officer could not get any answers at the door or anything like that. He called in, I guess, for backup at this point, because their main purpose is to get into this house to make sure Cody is okay. Remember, that was the only reason they were called there. The officer did find a way in through the master bedroom, and to make a long story short, he went in and found Cody, the mother Margaret, and the father Chad all murdered. Yeah. Grant's nowhere to be found. So at first, when the sheriff went in there, he at first thought it was a murder-suicide. But upon looking at the bodies a little bit more, he called into dispatch and say, hey, I need to retract that statement. I actually don't know what I have here, because things just looked a little off and a little weird. So he says, I don't know what I have here. We better call in a team. And so that's what they did. And the team of investigators, crime scene analysis, everybody showed up and started doing their investigation and doing their job. Now, I don't want to make this video too long, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to end this here, because that's basically what the story is. So part 2 will be the interrogation and the trial, because there's parts of that are really unbelievable and crazy as well. So anyway, you guys, I hope you enjoyed this little story. Stick around. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss part 2 for the interrogation and the trial conversation. And we will chat with you guys later.